the fete's disruption. The village of Thistlebrook was a place where time seemed to stand still. Ivy-clad cottages lined the winding cobblestone streets, their thatched roofs sagging slightly under the weight of history. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and old secrets, whispered from one doorstep to another. The Crooked Gate, an ancient iron structure bent by time and rust, stood at the far edge of the village. Legend had it that those who passed through it under the wrong circumstances met with misfortune. Some villagers claimed it was cursed, while others dismissed it as an old wives' tale meant to keep children from wandering too far. The annual spring fete was the highlight of the Thistlebrook calendar, bringing together villagers young and old to celebrate the changing season. Bunting fluttered in the gentle breeze, and the green was alive with the sounds of cheerful chatter, the clang of horseshoes hitting their mark, and the occasional burst of laughter from children racing between the stalls. Under a striped awning, Mrs. Pembroke fussed over her scones, making sure each one was displayed just so, while old Mr. Pritchard attempted to juggle 3 apples to the delight of a small crowd. A band played jaunty tunes, their brass instruments gleaming in the afternoon sun. Everything was as it should be, until it wasn't. The first sign that something was amiss was the silence. A ripple of unease spread through the crowd, laughter fading, voices hushed. Then came the scream. It was high-pitched, raw with shock, and cut through the pleasant afternoon like a knife. Heads turned toward the sound, eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Near the edge of the village green, a narrow lane led toward the Crooked Gate. People rushed in that direction, their festive mood forgotten. There, lying motionless on the ground, was a man. His clothes were dusty as though he had traveled far, his face pale, mouth slightly open as if he had been about to speak before death claimed him. The villagers hesitated, whispering among themselves. "It's him," someone murmured. "Francis Ireton." Gasps followed. Francis Ireton had been missing for 20 years. Vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and rumors. And yet, here he was, returned, only to die upon arrival. Miss Marple, who had been enjoying a delicate cup of Earl Grey with the vicar's wife, set her teacup down with deliberate care. Her sharp eyes took in the scene, her mind already piecing together the puzzle. She moved toward the crowd, gently pushing past the gathered villagers. Dr. Pembroke knelt beside the body, pressing his fingers to the man's neck. "No pulse," he said gravely. "But no sign of a struggle either." "He looks frightened," whispered Mrs. Chester, clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders. "As if he saw something terrible before he died." "A heart attack," suggested Mr. Tate, the local butcher. "Perhaps he was just overwhelmed by coming back." Miss Marple said nothing, merely observing. Her gaze flickered to the man's hands, noting the dirt beneath his fingernails. A traveler's hands, perhaps. Then she saw it, something glinting near the edge of his jacket, barely visible against the fabric. She leaned closer and plucked it free. It was a small, rusted key. The villagers continued to murmur as the constable arrived, pushing through the onlookers with an air of officialdom. He took one look at the lifeless man and let out a low whistle. "Francis Ireton," he muttered. "I thought we'd never see him again." "He came back," Miss Marple said softly, turning the key over in her palm. "But why? And why now?" The Crooked Gate loomed in the distance, silent and foreboding. A chill ran through Miss Marple, but it was not from the evening breeze. Something had drawn Francis Ireton back to Thistlebrook. Something had awaited him, and now, he was dead. Scene 2, the whispering passed. As the constable took charge of the investigation, Miss Marple spoke with the older villagers, piecing together Ireton's past. Rumors swirled about his involvement in a scandal before his disappearance. Some whispered about a hidden treasure linked to the Crooked Gate, while others insisted he had been cursed. Mrs. Pembroke recalled seeing a shadowy figure near the gate the night before, and Mr. Pritchard swore he had heard strange noises from the abandoned Ireton estate. Scene 3, Secrets in the Dust. Determined to find answers, Miss Marple and the constable visited the Ireton estate. Dust-covered furniture and forgotten relics hinted at a home frozen in time. In the study, Miss Marple found an old ledger containing cryptic notes about a promise unfulfilled. Near the fireplace, she uncovered a hidden compartment containing another key, a twin to the one found on Ireton's body. Outside, fresh footprints led to the estate's back gate, which pointed directly toward the Crooked Gate. Scene 4, the Crooked Gate's shadow. That evening, Miss Marple returned to the crooked gate, studying its rusted frame. She noticed scrape marks near the hinges, as if something had recently been pried loose. When she inserted the key from Iritan's body into the old lockbox embedded in the gatepost, it clicked open. Inside, she found a tattered letter, a confession of betrayal from a close friend of Iritan's. As she read the words, a shuffling noise came from the darkness. Scene 5, the face of the past. A figure emerged from the shadows, Mr. Tate, the butcher. His face was pale, his hands shaking. "I never meant for him to come back," he whispered. Miss Marple deduced that Tate and Iritan had once been partners in a scheme that went wrong. Iritan had fled, while Tate remained behind, hoping the past would stay buried. But Iritan had returned for the truth, only to be silenced by the same curse that had haunted the village. The constable stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Tate's shoulder. The mystery of the crooked gate was finally unraveled. Miss Marple sighed, watching the village settle once more. Some secrets, it seemed, could not remain hidden forever. Main first scene co 7,000 characters talk expand car dia high. Our additional details our suspense be add kia high. Agar tumhi our koi refinement chahi ya kisi our scene par kam karna high, to batao. Miss Marple's stay in St. Mary Mead had begun, but the peaceful days she had anticipated were quickly overshadowed by the arrival of a stranger, Sir Edgar Blackstone. The wealthy businessman, a man known for his success in real estate and his brash personality, had arrived in the village with the purpose of purchasing several properties surrounding St. Mary Mead. There were rumors of him planning major renovations, and while most of the villagers were too polite to voice their opinions directly, the news sent ripples through the community. Sir Edgar's arrival caused a stir, not only because of his intentions to buy up the land but also because of his sudden obsession with the crooked gate. The gate, which had stood untouched for centuries, had been a mystery to most of the villagers, but Sir Edgar saw it as nothing more than an obstacle to his plans. Miss Marple first met Sir Edgar one chilly morning when he appeared at Mabel's cottage, requesting an audience with her. He was tall and imposing, with sharp features that could have belonged to a man far younger than his true age. His suit was perfectly tailored, and his demeanor exuded an air of authority, as though he expected everyone to listen to him. "I understand you are Jane Marple," Sir Edgar began, extending his hand in a stiff, businesslike manner. "I've heard much about you, your talents as a detective. Quite the local legend, I'm told." Miss Marple accepted the handshake, her grip firm but unassuming. "I wouldn't go so far as to say, legend, Sir Edgar, but I have been known to help with a few problems here and there." Sir Edgar's lips curled into a slight smile, though his eyes remained cold. "Well, I'm sure you'll be of great help to me, then. You see, I've come to St. Mary Mead to make some changes. There's much potential here, but there's one thing that stands in my way." "The crooked gate," Miss Marple said quietly, finishing his thought. Sir Edgar's face betrayed a flicker of surprise, followed by a hint of amusement. "Ah, you know about it already. It's exactly what I was hoping you could help me with." Miss Marple studied him closely. There was something in his eyes that suggested he wasn't as interested in the gate itself but rather in the challenge it represented. "What exactly do you want to do with it?" "I intend to fix it," Sir Edgar said with conviction, almost as if the task were beneath him. "It's an eyesore, and it's holding back progress in this village. A gate that leans so carelessly, it's a symbol of stagnation. A village like this deserves better." Miss Marple listened carefully but said nothing. She had heard many people speak about the gate over the years, but none had expressed such a cold, clinical interest in it. "And you don't believe in the curse?" she asked, her tone almost teasing. Sir Edgar's smile faded slightly. "I'm not a superstitious man, Miss Marple. I deal in facts. And the fact is, that gate needs to be fixed. I have every intention of doing so. It's simply a matter of removing the obstacle." There was something about his words that didn't sit right with Miss Marple. It was not just the words themselves but the air of certainty with which they were delivered. She had met many determined men in her life, but few had been so blind to the subtle powers of history and superstition. The gate wasn't just a physical structure, it was a symbol, and perhaps it was something that should remain untouched. "I understand," she said thoughtfully. "But you may find that there are forces at work here that cannot be easily understood or controlled. Sometimes, it's best to let certain things be." Sir Edgar looked at her, his expression unreadable. Thank you for your advice, but I'm not one to shy away from challenges. I'll be taking a look at the gate myself tomorrow. If you'd like to accompany me, I would be happy to have your company." Miss Marple hesitated. There was no mistaking the challenge in his voice. It was as if he were daring her to disagree, to caution him further. But something in the way he spoke told her that he was not only determined but also eager to prove his point. "I'll consider it," Miss Marple replied, her voice calm but laced with an underlying curiosity. The meeting at the gate. The following afternoon, Miss Marple and Sir Edgar made their way to the Crooked Gate. It stood at the far edge of the village, beyond the neatly tended cottages and gardens. The path leading to it was overgrown with ivy and wildflowers, and the air had a distinct stillness to it, as though the world itself was holding its breath. As they approached the gate, Sir Edgar wasted no time in surveying it, his hands on his hips as he examined the rusted iron. Miss Marple stood quietly at a distance, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. The news of Sir Edgar Blackstone's death spread quickly through Street Mary Mead, leaving the village in a state of unease. The peaceful atmosphere that had once defined the village seemed to be slipping away, replaced by whispers and furtive glances. People gathered in groups, exchanging hushed words about the strange events surrounding the Crooked Gate, with many believing that the curse had claimed yet another victim. Miss Marple, however, remained undeterred by the mounting superstitions. She had lived long enough to know that fear often masked the truth, and she was determined to uncover what had really happened. Sir Edgar's death was no accident, it had been carefully orchestrated, and the key to understanding it lay in the village's history, and perhaps in the gate itself. The morning after Sir Edgar's death, Miss Marple visited the village's small library, a stone building tucked away at the far end of the square. It was the kind of place that smelled of dust and old leather-bound books, a quiet sanctuary for those seeking to uncover the past. Inside, the librarian, an elderly man named Mr. Ellsworth, greeted Miss Marple with a polite nod. "Good morning, Miss Marple," he said with a smile. "I understand you're here to look into the old records. What can I assist you with today?" "I'm looking for any history on the Crooked Gate," Miss Marple replied, her voice calm but purposeful. "Specifically, I need to know when it was built and what significance it might hold for the village." Mr. Ellsworth's face tightened at the mention of the gate, his eyes flicking nervously toward the window, as if expecting someone to overhear. "The Crooked Gate, you say? That gate's been the subject of many stories over the years. There are a few old records, but I'll warn you, Miss Marple, some of them are not for the faint of heart." "I'm not easily frightened," Miss Marple said, offering him a reassuring smile. "Please, I would like to see what you have." Mr. Ellsworth hesitated for a moment but then led Miss Marple to a back room filled with dusty shelves of books, scrolls, and faded documents. He pulled out a heavy leather-bound volume and handed it to her with a sense of reverence. "This is one of the oldest records we have," he said, his voice lowered. "It details the founding of the village and the construction of the gate." Miss Marple opened the book to the relevant page. The ink had faded over time, but the words were still legible enough. It spoke of a feud between two powerful families, the Devereux family and the Blackstone family. The Devereux had once been the village's landowners, but the Blackstones had gradually taken control, eventually leading to the construction of the gate. The document explained that the gate had originally been built as a symbol of the Blackstone family's dominance. However, during a violent storm that tore through the village many years ago, the gate had been struck by lightning and had bent out of shape. It was said that the gate's crookedness was a sign of the misfortune that had befallen the Blackstone family, a punishment for their greed and ambition. Miss Marple frowned as she read the passage. The story seemed too convenient, too simplistic. The gate's strange shape and the deaths surrounding it weren't mere accidents, they were the result of something far deeper. The curse, if it truly existed, was not supernatural. It was a manifestation of the bitterness, betrayal, and unspoken anger that had plagued the village for generations. As Miss Marple closed the book, she felt the weight of the past settling heavily upon her. The village's dark history wasn't just a collection of old stories, it was a living, breathing force, and Sir Edgar Blackstone's death was only the latest. Chapter The Secrets of Lady Eleanor. With the old records in hand, Miss Marple sought out the village's oldest residents. She knew that sometimes, the truth lay not in books but in the memories of those who had witnessed history firsthand. One of the oldest villagers was Mrs. Winifred Blanchard, a widow who had lived in St. Mary Mead for most of her life. She was a well-respected woman, known for her sharp wit and even sharper memory. Miss Marple visited her at her small cottage, tucked away at the edge of the village. Mrs. Blanchard greeted her with a warm smile, though her eyes showed a flicker of concern when she saw the papers Miss Marple had brought with her. "I see you're interested in the Crooked Gate, Miss Marple," Mrs. Blanchard said, her voice soft but steady. "That's a story I thought had been buried long ago. But I suppose it was bound to come to the surface eventually." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze steady. "I believe Sir Edgar Blackstone's death is linked to the gate, Mrs. Blanchard. And I'm certain there's more to this story than just a simple curse. Can you tell me more about the deed?" Miss Marple stared at Reverend Wicks, her keen eyes narrowing as she processed his words. The quiet chapel around them seemed to hum with tension, the flickering candlelight casting long, wavering shadows against the stone walls. "You caused Sir Edgar's death," she repeated, her voice calm but firm. The vicar's hands trembled as he gripped the edges of the wooden pew in front of him. He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing as if he were choking on words he could not bear to speak. I didn't mean to," he stammered. "I swear it, Miss Marple. It was never my intention." Miss Marple remained still, watching him with the patience of a seasoned detective. She had heard many confessions in her time, and she knew that guilt had a way of twisting itself into something far more complex than a simple admission of wrongdoing. "Tell me everything, Reverend," she urged gently. "From the beginning." Reverend Wicks let out a shuddering breath and buried his face in his hands. "It all started with the Crooked Gate," he murmured. "Or rather, what was buried beneath it." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "Go on." The vicar lifted his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sir Edgar came to me a few weeks ago, before he died. He was agitated, disturbed even. He told me he had uncovered something that would change everything we knew about the village's history. At first, I thought it was just his usual obsession with the past, but then he showed me a fragment of a letter from Lady Eleanor Devereux herself." Miss Marple's heart pounded. Lady Eleanor. What did the letter say? Reverend Wicks hesitated before reaching into his robes. With trembling fingers, he pulled out a crumpled, yellowed piece of paper and handed it to Miss Marple. She unfolded it carefully, scanning the faded ink with sharp eyes. The letter was brief but chilling. "Greater than to whomever finds this, know that I have spoken the truth. Thomas did not run away, he was taken. And the Crooked Gate is where he was laid to rest. He was betrayed, not by strangers, but by his own blood. The truth must be known, lest the curse claim us all." Miss Marple's breath caught. This was the missing piece she had been searching for. The Crooked Gate wasn't just a relic of an old feud, it was a burial site. Thomas Blackstone had been murdered, and someone had ensured that his body was hidden beneath the gate, forever tying his tragic fate to the village's dark history. She looked up at the vicar. "Sir Edgar wanted to excavate the gate, didn't he?" Reverend Wicks nodded miserably. "Yes. He was determined to dig beneath it, to prove that Lady Eleanor's words were true. But I couldn't let him do it." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. "Why?" The vicar closed his eyes, as if steeling himself for a terrible confession. "Because if the truth had come out, it wouldn't have just destroyed the Blackstone family, it would have destroyed me." Miss Marple stiffened. "You?" Reverend Wicks exhaled shakily. "I am a direct descendant of the Devereux family." The revelation hung between them like a thundercloud. "My great-grandfather was Eleanor's brother," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "And according to my family's secret records, it was he who orchestrated Thomas Blackstone's murder. He saw Thomas as a threat to the Devereux legacy, so he arranged for his disappearance." Miss Marple's mind raced. If this was true, then the curse of the Crooked Gate wasn't a supernatural force, it was a chain of violence and betrayal that had echoed through generations. "I was terrified of what would happen if Sir Edgar uncovered the truth," Reverend Wicks admitted. "My entire family's legacy would have been ruined. I tried to persuade him to stop, to let the past rest, but he wouldn't listen." Miss Marple leaned forward. "What did you do, Reverend?" Tears slipped down his wrinkled face. "I confronted him the night before he died. We argued, loudly. I told him that digging up the past would bring nothing but ruin, but he was relentless. He accused me of being a coward, of protecting a legacy built on lies." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. I lost my temper. He faltered. I pushed him. Miss Marple's eyes widened. Reverend Wicks's voice broke. He fell, Miss Marple. He hit his head on the stone pathway. I didn't mean to, I swear it. But when I saw him lying there, unmoving, I panicked. Miss Marple remained silent, allowing him to continue. I dragged him to the crooked gate, the vicar whispered, his voice thick with shame. I thought that if I left him there, people would believe the curse had taken him. That they wouldn't ask questions. A heavy silence filled the chapel. Miss Marple closed her eyes for a brief moment, piecing together the final puzzle. Sir Edgar's death was not the result of a supernatural curse, nor was it a premedita. The early morning mist clung to the village like a ghostly shroud as Miss Marple made her way toward the crooked gate. Her sharp eyes scanned the area, noting the centuries-old iron bars, rusted and warped by time. A few villagers had gathered, whispering amongst themselves, their breath visible in the chilly dawn air. Inspector Graves stood by with a small team of officers, shovels in hand, ready to uncover what had been hidden for so long. The tension was thick, the air charged with anticipation. "Are you certain about this, Miss Marple?" the inspector asked, his voice laced with skepticism. Miss Marple gave a small nod. "Quite. Lady Eleanor's letter was only a fragment, but it told us enough. The rest of the truth lies beneath this very gate." At her command, the officers began digging. The villagers held their breath as the shovels sliced through damp earth. Clumps of soil were overturned, and then, a dull thud. "Something's here," one of the officers called out. Carefully, they unearthed a wooden box, bound with iron. The sight of it sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. The box was centuries old, its wood splintered and worn, yet it had withstood time. Inspector Graves bent down, brushing away the last of the dirt. With gloved hands, he pried the lid open. Inside, wrapped in decaying cloth, lay human remains. A skull, its jaw slightly open as if frozen mid-scream. Beside it, a rusted dagger with the Devereux family crest. Miss Marple sighed. "Thomas Blackstone," she murmured. "The victim of betrayal and, it seems, a violent end." A collective murmur spread through the crowd. The curse of the crooked gate was no mere superstition, it was a legacy of blood and secrets. "And with this, the truth is finally revealed," she continued. Sir Edgar was right. He was close to exposing it, and that is why he was silenced. Inspector Graves straightened, his face grim. "We'll have to run tests, but given the historical evidence, this matches the legend exactly. And the dagger, it belonged to the Devereux family. That ties the murder directly to them." Miss Marple turned to Reverend Wicks, who stood pale and trembling. "Your ancestors' crime is now known, Reverend. The burden is no longer yours to carry." Tears welled in his eyes. "And Sir Edgar, what happens now?" "Justice," the inspector said firmly. "For both him and Thomas Blackstone." With the discovery at the crooked gate, the investigation into Sir Edgar's death took a decisive turn. Reverend Wicks had confessed, but Miss Marple still sensed there was more to the story. Something about his admission felt incomplete. Seated in the village inn, she reflected on the details, sipping a cup of tea as she rearranged the puzzle in her mind. The timeline did not fully align. He said he pushed Sir Edgar in anger, but something doesn't sit right, she muttered. A rustling outside caught her attention. She glanced toward the window and saw a shadow flit past. Without hesitation, she rose and stepped into the misty street. "Who's there?" A soft gasp, then silence. "Come now," she said gently. "You've been following me since the excavation. Perhaps it's time we spoke." A figure stepped forward, Margaret Lonsdale, Sir Edgar's niece. Her hands twisted in the fabric of her dress, her eyes wide with worry. "Miss Marple, I don't know who else to tell," she stammered. "I overheard something the night Uncle Edgar died." "Go on, my dear," Miss Marple encouraged. Margaret hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I was returning from the vicarage when I saw someone near the manor. A man. He was arguing with Uncle Edgar, but it wasn't Reverend Wicks." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "Do you know who it was?" Margaret swallowed hard. "It was Arnold Devereux." Arnold Devereux had always been a respected figure in the village. A direct descendant of the Devereux line, he had been vocal about preserving their legacy. But now, Miss Marple saw him for what he was, a man desperate to protect his family's dark past. She arranged for a meeting at his estate, where he greeted her with feigned politeness. "Miss Marple, to what do I owe the pleasure?" She met his gaze steadily. The truth, Mr. Devereux. About Sir Edgar. About the crooked gate. And about your role in all of it. His smile faltered. I don't know what you mean. Oh, I believe you do, she said, taking a seat. Sir Edgar was going to expose your family's crime. You followed him that night, didn't you? Confronted him. Arnold clenched his fists. And what if I did? That fool was determined to drag my family's name through the mud. I only meant to scare him off. But it escalated, she pressed. You struck him, didn't you? His nostrils flared. He fell, hit his head on the stones. I panicked. So I let the Reverend take the blame. Miss Marple nodded. A clever deception, but the truth always has a way of emerging, Mr. Devereux. As if on cue, Inspector Graves entered, his presence a silent confirmation. Arnold Devereux, you are under arrest for the murder of Sir Edgar Blackstone. With Arnold Devereux in custody, the case was finally closed. Reverend Wicks was cleared of intentional murder, though he faced consequences for concealing evidence. The village breathed a collective sigh of relief. The truth had been revealed, the curse of the crooked gate put to rest. Margaret Lonsdale thanked Miss Marple with teary eyes. If not for you, the truth would have been buried forever. Miss Marple smiled gently. The past has a way of calling to us, my dear. We must simply listen. As the sun set over St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple sat by her window, knitting in hand. Another mystery solved, another soul laid to rest. But as always, she knew that somewhere, another puzzle waited to be unraveled.